What's good, nerds? How y'all doing? It's your brother, Jay. The movie monk, the Criterion Choir boy, Hong Kong Fooey, and thank you for clicking all the right buttons to watch the movie mass. You're here, I'm here. I love it. This one's for you. Oktoberfest. Speaking of October, I know you guys have been chomping at the bit for my October recommendations. Every month I like to recommend movies to you people out there so that you can have my thoughts on what is seasonally appropriate viewing. You can't be screwing around in October and watching April Fool's Day. You just can't be doing it. I understand April Fool's Day is a horror and Halloween is a month for horror, but it's also April Fool's Day, April the 1st. And that's nowhere near October. So save April Fool's Day for April. And anyway, as I just alluded, the month of October is notorious for Halloween-related viewing. There's a lot of Halloween-related movies, as you guys already know. And like most of you, I choose to watch almost entirely horror and Halloween movies for the month of October. At the same time, there is so much spooky season content out there. I feel a little sheepish adding more. I want to do something at least a little bit different than what all of the other YouTube channels are doing this time of year. Guys like my man Chase from AV Pop Culture, he's serving up every day strong lists of recommendations. I don't want to just repeat what he's already doing for like 1% of the views, so I want to pick films that haven't necessarily been mentioned or at least haven't been beaten to death. So I'd like to recommend Columbus Day, starring Val Kilmer and Wilmer Valderrama. It's from 2008. I'm actually recording this on Indigenous Peoples Day. Don't call it Columbus Day, you bigoted shitlord. I messed up. I called it Columbus Day earlier. Now my sister-in-law won't talk to me. Columbus Day was released in fucking April, which, you know, they should have set that movie on Easter if they're going to do that. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I don't recommend watching Columbus Day. It looks like a giant piece of shit. What can I say? I like pushing buttons. So, look, for the record, I just want to throw it out there. I want to be on the record stating that all of the stuff that other YouTubers have mentioned, including Chase from AV Pop Culture, guys like Brian from Last Movie Standing, my other friends, my other cohorts, all of this stuff is great stuff that I endorse as well. You're going to have a really shitty October if you don't watch things like the original Halloween from 1978, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Halloween 4. The rest of the Halloweens are optional because mileage may vary. But let me just say that I staunchly side with the group of bold individuals who firmly assert that Halloween Resurrection is the biggest pile of steaming monkey shit I have ever watched. Busta Rhymes does kung fu on Michael Myers. What the fuck were these people thinking? I also think you need to watch Trick or Treat, or as I like to call it, the hard R Trick or Treat. Don't make that joke in mixed company. I already got in trouble once. Creepshow 2, you gotta watch those. Night of the Living Dead 1990, I just watched that shit last night, dog. American Werewolf in London is good stuff. Werewolf, love it. Silver Bullet, there's another werewolf one. All of this stuff is good, right? Something Wicked This Way Comes. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but to his credit, my man's Chase did mention Something Wicked This Way Comes. I don't hear a lot about it in Halloween from other blue tubers, but I recommend that one as well. But all of these movies are not part of my recommendation today. These are all part of other recommendations, other videos that you'll see, other great videos, great lists of recommendations that you'll see. But the films that I just rattled off are the same films I plan to watch between now and Halloween. On top of all of the stuff that's already been recommended out there on YouTube, I do want to make a recommendation. I've only got one for you, at least for right now, for the month of October. But with consideration to, Halloween and the viewing that tends to dominate our month of October. So I want to make a recommendation that is in the proper vein and proper spirit of Halloween viewing. I think my recommendation is a very good one for October. I've already tested it out about a week ago, and I think it holds up very nicely. And I'm going to spend the rest of the video supporting my recommendation. This might feel a little bit like homework. And I guess if you want to be cynical about it, it kind of is like homework. But I recommend that you watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the black and white silent film from 1920, made in Germany. It's a German Expressionism film. Anyway, this recommendation might feel like homework because 100-year-old black and white silent films kind of tend to lack appeal in the modern viewer who's accustomed to watching films in color. But you watched Sin City, didn't you? I know you watched at least one of them Sin City movies, and those were in black and white. Did you like those? There we go. Don't be so prejudiced against black and white, my friends. Dr. Caligari is only an hour and 14 minutes long. It's actually shorter than The Nightmare Before Christmas. So I know you can do it. You can get through it. You're a big boy. Put your big boy pantaloons on and watch Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. You got this. I know you can do this. Before I impress upon you the historical significance of Dr. Caligari, I'd like to highlight the film's merits, because it's not just homework, and I don't want to make a recommendation that you just go do some homework. Go watch this movie because it's film school. That's true. It is. It's part of film school, and it's part of knowing film history. So I recommend it for that reason, but I also want to say that this is a good movie on its own. Separating it from its historicity, this is still a worthy film, and I think a great one for spooky season. Dr. Caligari has stood the test of time. I already mentioned that it's 100 years old. It's 100 years old, all right? We're still talking about this film 100 years later, and it's not just because some film historians 75 years ago decided that it was important and brainwashed the rest of us for generations. I mean, 100 years later, if we're sticking with it, there's something good about it that new generations are picking up on when they go back and watch. Why would I recommend Dr. Caligari to you? It's not like my grandpa directed the shit. Hell, Dr. Caligari was 15 years old when my grandpa was born, so I got no personal reason to push Dr. Caligari on you, right? It's not like I get a buck from Kino Lorber if they sell a 4K of Dr. Caligari. They don't know who I am. Now, Dr. Caligari should be viewed because it's a heavily stylized film with dreamlike imagery. The backdrops are hand-painted. Check these out. They give the architecture of the town of Holstenwall a jagged, irregular, warped appearance that is very appropriate, I think, given that the majority of the film takes place in a subjective flashback. Most of what we're seeing is inside the narrator's head. The stylization of the film reflects the unreliable narrator of the tale, who turns out to be an inmate in an asylum. So the guy telling the story is cuckoo to begin with, and that's why the imagery in his tale is so warped and twisted. Now, the visuals are dreamlike for sure, but not like any old dream. It's very nightmarish. The city streets are labyrinthine. They don't make sense. They lean in on the characters. The back alleys of Holstenwall are twisted and disorienting. The visual appeal of Dr. Caligari is in its rejection of reality in favor of this nightmare dreamscape I'm describing, which, in my opinion, is perfect for spooky season. It's like a haunted house on film. Now, the performances are similarly stylized. The silent era was one of big performances. Subtlety be damned. You know, these people have to do everything with gesture and with facial expression. And there was no subtlety because you weren't hearing their voices. The titular doctor, Dr. Caligari, is crazed, demented. He's as twisted and warped as the imagery. And Werner Krause's performance reflects that, not in subtle ways. Werner Krause is not subtle in this performance, and it's great. He's menacing. He's egotistical. He murders anybody who crosses him. There's Cesar, of course. That's the somnambulist that is the doctor's instrument of death. Dr. Caligari wields Cesar, like an instrument of death, an automaton that deals out fate to whomever is pissed off Dr. Caligari. Now, Cesar is an automaton, as I mentioned, but he's a little bit more device than man. And Conrad Veidt plays that to perfection. Again, he's got this athletic, almost like a dancer's-like ability to move across the screen. He glides mechanically through the jagged and twisted streets under the cover of night. You know, kind of, you can imagine him going through the alleyways in the dark of night. Nobody can see him. He's dressed head to toe in black. He's monstrous in his deeds and in the oddity of his nature, the fact that he's a somnambulist. He's completely unaware of what he's doing. He's monstrous. He murders people. That's monstrous. But he's so graceful in his movements, again, like a dancer, like a ballet artist. Ultimately, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari's greatness is a matter of its unique artistic achievement. It's not a reflection of reality like the earlier Lumiere brothers films were meant to be. A reflection of reality, filmed on location in real places using real people, non-actors. That's not this. That's not the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This is the total opposite, in fact. The ethereal atmosphere of Dr. Caligari is really what makes this film so enjoyable. And it's an atmosphere that is very appropriate, I think, for the Halloween season. You can even put this one on TV to fall asleep to. You can like put this one on. The music is great. The vibe is great. Put it on and like fall asleep to this while it's playing, because that could be a great way to slide into some like wild, crazy dreamscape. Wild dreamscape. I mean, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is all balls. It's just an hour and 15 minutes, like I said. It's relentless and it's over quick. It's not a slog, I promise you that. So I hope I've convincingly described why the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a great film and one that's appropriate for October viewing. Next, I have to do it. I would like to discuss the film within the context of its historical significance, because I got to talk about what makes this an important film and why it's so culturally well regarded. Now, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari was 60 years old at the time the original John Carpenter's Halloween was released. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari had influenced filmmakers who went on to influence other filmmakers before John Carpenter was even out of diapers. Dr. Caligari had already had a tremendous influence. I'm not trying to diminish John Carpenter in any way, mind you. What I mean to say is that there has been ample time for the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari's influence to diffuse, for it to pass on into other films, and from those films to other films. It was 60 years old, almost 60 years old, when Halloween Part 1 came out, and so it had already diffused culturally to be a more subtle and subconscious influence on filmmakers, even at that time, even almost 50 years ago. Think about heredity. My paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, had died when my dad was only 10 years old or so. But just because I never met the guy doesn't mean that I didn't inherit some of his features. I could have his eyes, for instance. I could have his nose, whatever. But what I'm saying is that there's a certain heredity to filmmaking as well. And once ideas, images, styles become diffuse and they've propagated on through generations, they might crop up again even without the filmmaker knowingly and intentionally paying homage. As such, I believe that the influence of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari can be observed in films like the original Halloween, even if John Carpenter never explicitly acknowledged the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as a direct influence. Dr. Caligari is old enough and significant enough to, I think, be a subtle and indirect influence on films that followed thereafter in the ensuing decades. Let me ask you this. Do you enjoy the jagged shapes and painterly aesthetic of Beetlejuice or The Nightmare Before Christmas? I think if so, you're ready for the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Amongst other inspirations, such as like horror comics and Dr. Seuss even, Tim Burton has cited German Expressionism as an aesthetic influence on him. And honestly, it's not hard to see. I just watched The Nightmare Before Christmas yesterday with my daughters. It's not difficult at all to see that there is an aesthetic connection between the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and The Nightmare Before Christmas. And think about Gotham City in the Batman movies, the Tim Burton Batman movies. Gotham City is Holstenwald writ large. It's like on urban steroids. It's got the same dark quality, the same jagged and oppressive quality of the streets and of the buildings. This is fairly typical of German Expressionism. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari tends to be the film that people point to when they need an example of German Expressionism in cinema. For instance, F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu from 1922 is also considered part of the German Expressionism movement in film. And that movement largely ended by the mid-1920s. It didn't last for very much longer after Nosferatu. But even still, 100 years later, you still hear people on the internet, on YouTube, occasionally at least, mentioning German Expressionism, talking about it even today, 100 years later, as if it's relevant on the current topic, which I think it is. Now, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is significant as a very early example of a film which presents images and events on screen that are subjective in nature. It's not just showing us things, but it's showing us inside somebody's head. The things that they're imagining appear on screen. And this is a very early example of that. Consider The Usual Suspects. Much more recent film than Dr. Caligari. Now, the entirety of The Usual Suspects that we see as the viewer takes place in Verbal Kint's testimony of events. He is relating to the police detective what happened leading up to the present. He takes us back and he walks us all the way through the events. As the viewer, that's what we see unfold on the screen. That's the story that we watch in The Usual Suspects. But in the film's closing moments, we learn through this dramatic reveal, it's very satisfying, we learn that Verbal is actually the mythical Kaiser Soze, and that everything that we've just watched has been a fabrication, that Verbal / Kaiser Soze simply made up on the spot using little details he picked from around the room. The quartet, the barbershop quartet, every little detail he wove into this story that once you learn that, you don't know what of anything that you've just watched really happened in The Usual Suspects. How much of that was just shit that he made up? It's all subjective. Now, similarly, the entirety of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a story told by a man in an insane asylum. It is one of the first films to depict the subjective inner world of an unreliable narrator. And this is fairly novel in cinema at the time. Again, cinema's not super old in 1920, but this is, again, fairly novel to present these things from an unreliable narrator. So a lot of the films that came after the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which have followed characters through a psychosis, movies like Psycho, Shutter Island, even Joker for a more recent one, just to name a couple of well-known ones, they harken back to the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, intentionally or not. Now, for one last example, I want to talk about some impressions that I had from my most recent viewing of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Like I said, I watched it about a week ago, and being that Halloween seasonal movies are on my brain, it's that time of the year, but I noted a number of similarities between the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and John Carpenter's original Halloween from 1978. Firstly, both Michael Myers and Cesar, the somnambulist, are escaped inmates from a mental asylum. They're both inmates from a mental asylum let loose upon the world to do their work. Additionally, both Myers and Cesar are silent killers who kill with a large knife. It was remarkable to me how much César's knife looked like the kitchen knife, the French knife that Michael Myers frequently uses. Both Myers and César are clad in nondescript dark colors. Again, nothing that draws attention to them, and in fact, colors and garments that allow them to kind of blend in with the shadows of the night. There's also a similar film language to the silent stalking of César and Myers through the darkness of Holston Wall and Haddonfield, respectively. Neither character is rageful. Neither character is an enraged killer killing in a state of passion. Both of these characters kill wordlessly, without a concise motive, perhaps even compulsively. They may be compelled to kill. César and Michael both are seemingly driven by something mysterious and fundamental. But the key defining characteristic that Michael Myers and César the somnambulist share is how their respective visages trigger the uncanny valley response in the viewer, which I think is an intentional decision on behalf of the filmmakers of both movies. I've always thought that the choice of a mask for Michael Myers was a particularly genius decision. Unlike a hockey mask, for instance, that William Shatner mask is supposed to look something like a human face, except it's a latex mask from the 70s, so it doesn't look real, obviously. And painting it white was also a great move because this mask becomes an imitation of life. It's lifeless, but it's like a caricature of the human form. It still has lips and a nose, but everything else about it looks so lifelike and like a mannequin. Now, while he doesn't wear a mask, César is heavily made up in white, a thick white makeup, a thick white paint is laid upon his face with dark shadowing around his eyes and his mouth, and it gives him this eerie kind of corpse-like appearance. And he looks more like a wraith or a specter than he does a human being, at least in the face. And so there's a very similar, almost identical visual impact of the characters of Michael Myers and César, that they both have this weird kind of imitation of a human form, and they both have these human-like visages, which is genius because these things are more deeply unsettling than showing their real faces or using masks that simply cover without revealing this weirdness or this creepiness by imitating a human visage. Now, I don't take any of this as proof that Carpenter was directly influenced by Dr. Caligari. As I said earlier, there's no reason to believe, there's no interview that I could possibly cite in which John Carpenter admits to being directly influenced by the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, at least not one that I'm aware of. We do know that, from the original Halloween and The Thing, that amongst other works, that John Carpenter is the type of filmmaker that has a kind of knowing love of the films that came before, films of the 50s that might have had an influence on him, hence his remake of The Thing. So I think it's safe to say that Carpenter is influenced by films of the past. But what I do think is true, even if Carpenter wasn't directly influenced by the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, what I do think is true is that there are some things that are just universally scary. Universal human responses to things like distortions of the human face or wearing dark clothing and murdering under the cover of night. And so things that we might consider universally scary today may have been birthed onto the screen by the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So not only does the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari stand on its own as a movie that is well worth your 74 minutes, it's got 100 years of influence on top of that. And I really think that you should watch the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in the month of October if you want to be cultured, sophisticated, well-educated, and stuck up like me. Anyway, I appreciate you guys for hanging out for this video. Especially appreciate these fools right here. You can't really see my finger, can you? Especially these fools right here. These are the real ones. I love you guys. This one is for you. Cheers. Go watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, fools. Peace. I'm out.